For today's video, we will answer a math challenge given by one of our followers. And the question goes like this. Evaluate summation of cosine theta from theta equals to 1 degree up to 180 degrees plus summation of cosine squared theta wherein theta comes from 1 degree to 180 degrees plus the summation of sine of 10 times theta from 1 degree up to 36 degrees. Now, here's some hints to answer this kind of question. The first one is cosine theta must be equal to negative cosine of 180 degrees minus theta. Also, we have the Pythagorean identity, sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Also, we have here sine theta must be equal to cosine of 90 degrees minus theta, or simply the complement rule. And the last one, we have sine theta equals negative sine of 360 degrees minus theta. Now, you can pause this video if you want to give this problem a try. Now, suppose you pause this video and have the answer. Now, let's see if your answer is correct. Alright. Now, our goal is to get the summation of cosine theta from 1 degree up to 180 degrees plus the sum of cosine squared theta from 1 degree up to 180 degrees plus the sum of 10 times theta from 1 degree up to 36 degrees. Now, to answer this, let's focus on this expression, summation of cosine theta, wherein cosine theta goes from 1 to 180 degrees. So, this is equivalent to just cosine 1 degree plus cosine 2 degree plus cosine 3 degree plus all the way down to cosine of 180 degrees. And take note, on the middle part, we have also cosine 89 degrees plus cosine 90 degrees plus cosine 91 degrees and so on and so forth. Alright. Now at this point, we will use one of the hints wherein it says that cosine theta must be equal to negative cosine of 180 degrees minus theta. Now let's get cosine of 179 degrees. And what is the equivalent value of cosine of 179 degrees? And this is equivalent to just negative of cosine using this identity. Alright? So we have negative cosine of 180 degrees minus 179 degrees. And 180 degrees minus 179 degrees, this will give us 1 degree. So, cosine 179 degrees must be the same thing as negative cosine of 1 degrees. So, if we add cosine 1 degrees plus cosine of 179 degrees, and we know this is negative cosine 1 degrees, this is just 0. Also, cosine 2 degrees and cosine 178 degrees is also equivalent to just 0 when we add them, because cosine 178 degrees is the same thing as negative cosine of 2 degrees. And also, cosine 3 degrees and cosine 177 degrees cancel out. This is just 0. All the way down to cosine 89 degrees plus cosine 91 degrees. This is just 0. Now, cosine 90 degrees. This is just 0. We all know that. Therefore, the value of the summation of cosine theta, wherein theta goes from 1 to 180 degrees, must be equal to just cosine of 180 degrees, because all of them must be equal to 0. And now, what is the value of cosine 180 degrees? This is just negative 1. Therefore, the value of this expression must be equal to just negative 1. Alright. Now, how about the second expression? We have summation of cosine squared theta, wherein theta goes from 1 to 180 degrees. So, let's do that. And this is equivalent to just cosine squared 1 degrees plus cosine squared 2 degrees plus all the way down to cosine squared 180 degrees. And of course, in the middle part, we also have cosine squared 89 degrees plus cosine squared 90 degrees and so on and so forth. Now, a while ago, we said using this identity, we get that cosine of 179 degrees must be the same thing as negative cosine of 1 degree. Now, what will happen if you square on both sides? So you have cosine of 179 degrees raised to the power of 2 and negative cosine 1 degrees raised to the power of 2. Now notice, both sides of our equation now becomes positive because negative cosine 1 degree times negative cosine 1 degree, this will give us positive cosine squared 1 degree. So, cosine squared of 179 degrees must be the same thing as cosine squared of 1 degree. Therefore, cosine squared 1 degree plus cosine squared 179 degrees is just the same thing. So we have here 2 times of cosine squared 1 degree. We have 2 of them. We also have 2 of cosine squared 2 degrees because these are just the same thing. We also have 2 pairs of cosine squared 89 degrees because these are just the same thing. Now also take note that this cosine squared 90 degrees, we know this is just equal to 0. So in this series, we can say that we have twice of cosine squared 1 degree, twice of cosine squared 2 degrees, all the way down to twice of cosine squared 89 degrees, and plus cosine squared 180 degrees. Now at this point, let's evaluate cosine squared of 180 degrees. We know cosine of 180 is negative 1, so raised to the power of 2, this is just 1. Now at this point, we will use now the hint that says that sine theta must be equal to cosine of 90 degrees minus theta. Now let's get first this cosine 89 degrees without squared. So cosine 89 degrees, what is the equivalent of cosine 89 degrees? Cosine 89 degrees must be equal to cosine of 90 degrees minus 1 degree. Because 90 degree minus 1 degree is just 89 degrees. And using this identity, we can say that cosine of 90 degrees minus 1 degree must be equal to sine of 1 degrees. So, if we square on both sides, we can say that cosine of, we have here 89 degrees, cosine of 89 degrees must be equal to sine squared 1 degree. So, if we add cosine squared 1 degree plus, we know this is sine squared 1 degree. If we add this together, using this third hint, we have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1, or the Pythagorean identity. We can say that the sum of this must be equal to just 1. Also, cosine squared 2 degrees plus cosine squared 88 degrees must be also adds up to 1 using the Pythagorean identity. Now also notice that we also have cosine squared 44 degrees plus cosine squared 46 degrees, and we all know this is just equal to 1 also. Now the question, how many 1s do we have inside the parentheses? So from cosine squared 1 degree up to cosine squared 44 degrees. So we have 44 1s. And now, also take note that cosine 45 degrees is just, let's have this, cosine 45 degrees is square root of 2 over 2. And if we square this, we get 2 over 4, or simply equal to 1 half. So inside the parentheses, we have 44 1s and 1 half. So this is just equivalent to 2 times 44 plus 1 half, or 1 over 2. Now, if we combine this, 44 plus 1 over 2, this will give us 89 over 2. And 2 times 89 over 2, if we multiply this, we get 89. And 89 plus 1, 89 plus 1, this is just 90. Therefore, the value of the summation of cosine squared theta, wherein this theta goes from 1 degree up to 180 degrees, must be equal to 90. So this expression right over here must be equal to 90. And for the last one, let's have this expression, the summation of sine of 10 times theta, wherein this theta goes from 1 degree up to 36 degrees. And this is equivalent. to just sine of 10 degrees plus sine of 20 degrees all the way down to sine of 360 degrees. And we know also that in the middle of this, we have sine of 170 degrees plus sine of 180 degrees plus sine of 190 degrees. And now, for the last time, we use the first hint, the second hint, and the third hint. So let's now use the fourth hint. And it says that sine theta equals negative sine of 360 degrees minus theta. So now, we can say that this sine 350 degrees must be the same thing as negative sine 10 degrees using this identity. Therefore, if we add sine 10 degrees plus sine of 350 degrees, this is just 0. And also, sine 20 degrees and sine 340 degrees is also 0. Also, sine 170 degrees plus sine 190 degrees, this is just 0. And we all know, sine of 180 degrees, this is just 0 also. And sine of 360 degrees, this is just 0. So all of these are gone because they are just 0. Therefore, the value of the summation of sine of 10 times theta, wherein theta goes from 1 degree up to 36 degree, must be equal to just 0. So, our expression becomes negative 1 plus 90 plus 0. And if we add these three numbers, we get 89. And that is the answer to this question. Therefore, what is the value of the summation of cosine theta, wherein this theta goes from 1 degree up to 180 degrees, plus the summation of cosine squared theta, wherein this theta goes from 1 degree up to 180 degrees, plus the summation of sine of 10 times theta, wherein this theta goes from 1 degree up to 36 degrees, and our answer is 89. And as always, we are done.